Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me on another extraordinary adventure that we will be embarking on today. I spoke to you guys a little over a month ago that I was ready to start a new PC build, but I was really unsure about who I wanted to go with. Did I want to go with Intel, or did I want to go with AMD? And I felt that at the current time for when I really wanted to get this build done, which I really wanted to go for the beginning of the year rather than later in the year, I decided to go with Intel's 12900K because I know that it's going to be enough of a monster to handle the video editing, the gaming, as well as streaming, recording, etc. And I wanted to pair that with a sizable motherboard as well, so we have the ROG Strix Z90E gaming Wi-Fi motherboard. To go along with that, we have two Samsung 980 Pros, a 2 terabyte to be able to handle our gaming files as well as our video editing files, because those are pretty big files. Also a 500 gigabyte NVMe 980 to be able to handle our operating system as well as any other internet fun we decide to download. Along with that, we are going to be using the Corsair H150i Elite LCD. This claims that it does come with LGA 1700 compatibility. I have seen several videos where it does look like these brackets are updated for the Z690 motherboards, which means any existing AIOs without this bracket fit will not be compatible to fit over and cool your CPU to its specifications. I will also be able to see temperatures for the GPU, CPU, which is definitely going to be good for how my system is running, as well as adding my sister's cat's face to the LCD screen and tell her that her cat is now running my high-end CPU for the remainder of the year. Anyway, we are going to pair this as well with our EVGA 3080 for the win Ti gaming GPU. And I know that this gaming GPU is going to be great for 1440p up to 4K gaming, as well as being able to handle my video editing programs. I'm going to be using DaVinci Resolve, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing its performance. Along with our items here, we're going to be using the RM850X because after doing informational research and pairing with all of my parts here, we're going to be hitting some high power limits. So the 850 is going to be a little more than enough to be able to handle all of our components inside of our case here, which we have the P500A Fantex RGB white variant that we will be building into today. It has great airflow from what I've been hearing. It has what it looks like 3 140 millimeter RGB light fans on the front to be able to handle the intake coming in, great airflow at the top and the bottom as well. Is there anything I missed? Oh yeah, there's Windows too. We're going to be installing that. But I don't really think that there's anything else that we have to cover here. Oh yeah, I almost did forget. We are also going to be using DDR5 Corsair Vengeance 5600 32 gigabyte memory for our motherboard. Definitely will be enough to handle our games and our video editing and all that great stuff. And one of the last components that we'll be talking about here is our 140 millimeter RGB style magnetic levitating fan that we'll be using for our exhaust here in the back of our P500. And I said levitating, which means it will be able to levitate on its own and we won't have to screw in anything. Figure that one out. I think it is time now to start our adventure. So strap yourselves in. It's gonna be a wild ride.
We are going to start with our first step here, and that is unboxing our motherboard and seeing what additional components are included. A PCIe expansion card necessary for additional M.2 storage, a physical disc containing your drivers, a ROG Strix strap,
Oh, we got some cool stickers.
and zip ties for cable management. Now let's take our motherboard out of its static protected plastic and place it on top of our motherboard box. This is a safe and effective method to connect all your necessary components into your motherboard without damaging the pins on the backside. Now it is time for us to install our first component, which will be the Central Processing Unit, better known as the CPU. When handling your CPU, make sure to handle it by its sides and do not touch the pins on the back side. The CPU socket is briefly protected by a cover held down by a load lever. Let's lift up on the lever, which will allow us to lift up on the cover and expose the CPU socket. Your motherboard and CPU will have directional arrows for the correct CPU placement. Allow gravity to do the job, and your CPU should just fall into place. We're going to take the latch back down over top of our CPU and press firmly. This will allow the CPU cover to pop off. Don't be afraid if it gives you a big pop. You'll know that you're on the right track. There we go. Remove the CPU cover completely and take the lever back down and lock it into place. This will ensure securement for your CPU. Your CPU is now locked into place. Step 1 completed. Next up is Random Access Memory, better known as RAM for short. Our motherboard has 4 available DIMM slots. Since we have 2 sticks of RAM, we are going to take advantage of dual channel configuration. That means we'll be inserting our first stick of RAM into the second available DIMM slot, also known as A2 on our motherboard. Make sure to press down firmly. Once the latch locks back into place, we'll know that our stick of RAM is inserted correctly and secure. If you have 1 stick of RAM, also insert it into the second available slot on your motherboard. If you have 4 sticks of RAM, populate all 4 DIMM slots with all 4 sticks. And to complete dual channel configuration, we are going to be inserting our second stick of RAM into the 4th DIMM slot, also known as B2. The same principles apply here, just make sure to give your RAM plenty of pressure until your latch locks back into place. Your RAM sticks are now properly installed and secure. Excellent work, everyone. Keep it up. Alright guys, challenge number 3, and that will be our M.2 SSDs. If your SSD ports have plated covers, go ahead and remove them first. We will want to remove the plastic strips that will expose our thermal pads. Our thermal pads are going to be used to insulate and cool our SSD. Without the proper use of thermal pads, your SSDs could potentially overheat and malfunction. With our thermal pads now exposed on our cover and our motherboard, let's go ahead and get our first SSD ready for insert. As you can see, our SSD has a little space cut out on the right side here. This is the side that we're going to be inserting into the motherboard. There's really no wrong way to do this. As long as you line up the little space on your M.2 with the insert on your motherboard, you should be good to go. Apply a little bit of force, and when you hear the click, your M.2 is properly inserted and will raise up a little bit. If your motherboard came with M.2 screws, make sure to screw your M.2 down into place. If your motherboard has a Q latch like mine does, just rotate the latch until it's properly seated above the SSD. We are now ready to go ahead and reapply the heatsink to the M.2. Just make sure that the thermal pad is exposed and set the heatsink down over top of the SSD. There's no need to apply too much force here, just be a little easy with your hands and allow the screws to find the screw holes. Once you got the heatsink all lined up, just grab the trusty screwdriver and screw it on down into securement. Nice work on getting your first M.2 SSD successfully installed. If you don't have any more M.2s to install, go ahead and skip to the next appropriate section of the video. If you're like me and you have an additional M.2 that you will be using, go ahead and remove the second heatsink, and you'll notice that we'll have 2 additional spaces for M.2s, but we're only going to be using our 2 terabyte M.2. So same principle applies here. We'll just remember to remove the plastic over top of our thermal paste and insert our SSD into the appropriate insert location. Make sure to apply an appropriate amount of force until you hear the click. There we go. Your second M.2 is successfully installed. Make sure to secure your SSD down with your M.2 screw or rotate the Q latch over top of the SSD. We're now ready to apply our heatsink to our second SSD. Make sure, if you haven't yet, go ahead and remove the plastic strips to expose the thermal pads. If you're only using one additional M.2, you do not have to worry about removing the second strip of plastic. You may leave it as is. And let's go ahead and lay our heatsink back over top of our SSD. Go ahead and grab your screwdriver, and we're going to secure our heatsink back down into place. Go ahead and give yourselves a little pat on the back. So far, we've installed all the major components onto our motherboard. Now let's move on to our next challenge, which will be assembling our AIO. This is a 360mm radiator that has 3 120mm fans included, as well as a set of screws and washers. As we begin to mount the first fan, it is important to know which direction we would like the airflow to travel. For this particular setup, we are going to be using a push configuration. And what that means is while our fans are spinning, the air is going to be sucked through the blades and pushing against the radiator. This will allow the air to transfer itself through the radiator and exhaust out through the other side. If we were to be using a pull configuration, then our fans would be mounted on the opposite side of the radiator. This would instead allow the air to be pulled through the radiator, transferred through the fans, and exhausted out through the other side. But that's not all, folks. We also have what is known as a push and pull configuration, which is basically a definition of the two put together. You have fans mounted on the front side of your radiator and fans mounted on the back side of your radiator, thus allowing the air to be pushed through the radiator and pulled out through the other side. If you're still unsure about which configuration is right for you, then that's okay. The internet and YouTube are your friend, and there are a ton of examples out there that showcase the differences and benefits that come with each configuration and what could potentially be best for your build. It's important to know that when we are bringing air into a PC, we also want to give it a chance to escape. This proper use of airflow allows our components to stay cool and operate at their intended functionality. If you're building up an all-in-one cooler just like myself here, let's get these last few screws secured and give ourselves 2 thumbs up. Our next challenge will be installing our motherboard into our case. A safe scenario here is to lay your PC case flat on an even surface such as a coffee table or a work table, just as long as it's not the carpet. Also, it's likely that your PC case will come with pre-applied motherboard standoffs. These will assist in keeping your motherboard secured into place. Just make sure to have a firm grip on the motherboard from its sides as you lay it down into the PC case. Just make sure not to touch the pins on the back side. This can be a bit of a process since spacing does get a little tight, but let's make sure to stay patient and don't be afraid to get a little handsy with the motherboard to make sure that we get it seated properly. We'll want to make sure that the IO shield is properly seated in the back, as well as our screw holes on the motherboard properly seated above the motherboard standoffs. Believe me guys, it did take me a few times to do this, so don't worry, we're gonna make it through. If you are having any issues at all at this point, hey, patience is your best friend. If you need to walk away, just walk away for a little bit, take a breather. I promise you, your PC's gonna be waiting for you when you get back. Once your motherboard and IO shield are properly seated, let's go ahead and take our motherboard screws to secure our motherboard down into its rightful location. If you're alone in this project like I am, make sure to give yourself a high five. If you have a work buddy who's helping you along the way, make sure to give them a high five, because I think that we have completed one of the first big accomplishments in our build today, which is getting the motherboard installed into the PC. But we have plenty of challenges that lie ahead, so let us prepare for what's coming up next. Once all your screws are wounded tightly, go ahead and flip your PC case right side up. Next up, we're going to mount our AIO into our PC case. What we're going to do first is we're going to make sure to take our fan wires and route them up to the back side of the PC case here. Remember what I was saying about a proper intake and outtake when it comes to your airflow. I have 3 140mm fans on the front, which will be bringing air into the PC, and my 3 120mm fans connected to my radiator will be responsible for allowing that air to disperse out of the PC. And later I'm also going to be installing a 140mm fan in the back as an additional exhaust for our PC here. Once you have all your fan wires routed through to the back, go ahead and give them a soft little tug and allow your radiator to come into the PC with it. With our fan wires routed in, let's go ahead and grab a few mounting screws and a screwdriver, and let's secure down our AIO. It probably would be best to go ahead and start from one corner and then go to the other corner. That way we can establish stability and give our arm a little bit of a break. Once you have that stability established, let's go ahead and apply the rest of the mounting screws and firmly secure the AIO into place. Congratulations on getting the AIO successfully installed inside the PC case. Let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about the backplate for a moment. The backplate's job is to help establish a connection with the AIO Coldplate. An important note to keep in mind is to make sure that the LGA mounting screws that came with your AIO are going to be compatible with your motherboard. Without this compatibility, we cannot guarantee that there will be thermal stability between your AIO and your CPU. We're just going to do a little test here, and as you can see, our mounting screws are evenly seated and exposed on all 4 sides of the motherboard. A tech video that I watched from YouTube showed me that this was a way to actually test compatibility. Let's remove the protective paper from our backplate and mount it into place on the back of our motherboard. Press down firmly on all sides to make sure that our mount stays in place. With our backplate in place, let's move on up to the next one. Let's get ready to mount the cold plate to the CPU. Take your LGA mounting screws and screw them in to the back plate. Make sure to screw them in all the way so that they are securely seated. Since we're on the subject of our cold plate, let's go ahead and talk about thermal paste for a minute. Thermal paste is used as the protective barrier between our AIO and the CPU. It is designed to eliminate air gaps and spaces between the cold plate and the IHS. It also allows for heat to be transferred from the IHS of the CPU to the base plate or the water block of the CPU's cooler that in return will dissipate that heat.
Yeah, like I said, it makes sense for it to be here.
Of course it would. Where else is it going to go? If your cold plate does not have a pre-applied application of thermal paste, you'll have to make sure that you apply thermal paste to your CPU before we continue. There are a wide variety of applications that are sufficient. Go ahead and choose one that suits you, just don't apply too much. With our thermal paste applied, it is time to secure our cold plate down to the CPU. Just make sure that your bracket is able to be seated within the 4 points of your mounting screws. Once you have established all 4 points of connectivity, it is time to secure down our cold plate once and for all. Go ahead and grab our included thumb screws and we will begin to secure our AIO cold plate into place. Make sure to screw the block down as evenly as possible. We want to make sure that we have an equal transfer of heat between our IHS and the cold plate. Just a quick tip, make sure to be careful with your hands because gravity is not always going to be your friend. It actually took me a while to get that out of there, but hey, I didn't say that this build wouldn't come without its mishaps. We're back on track, let's try it again. Gravity, no shenanigans this time. Alrighty, there we go. We got it into place and let's secure it all down. You guys are amazing. Give yourselves a big high five. Your AIO or cooler is now fully installed.
And now comes the part everybody's been waiting for. Plugging everything in. I am definitely going to need some motivational music for this one.
If you are running an AIO like myself, go ahead and plug the pump into the AIO pump header. This will allow our fan speeds from our radiator to run at 100%, but that can also be changed later if you wish to do so. If you are running a standard air cooler, then you'll want to plug yourself into the CPU opt or CPU fan headers as alternatives. Let's move on to installing our rear exhaust fan. Since we have fans in the front of our case that are going to be bringing air in, it's also an essential option to have a rear exhaust fan that will allow that air to be blown back out. A steady free flow of air in and air out will allow our components to stay chill and cool and functional. Go ahead and take a moment here to route your wires into the back. And once you got the wires through, just go ahead and give them a tight little tug and bring your fan on in with it. It's also a helpful hint to refer to your PC case manual to see what size fans are compatible to fit within your PC case. Since we do intend on this being an exhaust fan, just make sure that we are mounting the fan on the correct side. We want to make sure that the air is being pulled through the fan and blown out of the case. Once we have our fan properly seated, let's go ahead and grab our screwdriver and set of screws and secure it down into place. Our exhaust fan is properly mounted. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. If your case has available RGB lighting, then that's what we're going to move on to next. We have a 3-pin connector here, and on our motherboard we also have a spot for a 3-pin connector. So that's where we're going to connect our RGB case lighting into. Let's go ahead and take a look at the commander core that comes with the H150i Elite. As you can see on this side, it comes with a very specific connector that is for the AIO pump. And on this side, we have a Sata connection as well as a USB connector. And this is our cord from our AIO pump that is going to be connected in directly with the commander core. I was actually unaware of this and bought a Commander Core XT instead, and I realized that it does not come with that intended compatibility, so we will not be using that today. Since we will need an available spot for our Commander Core, we will have to take out one of the SSD drive trays real quick. Let's go ahead and remove the plastic, revealing the sticky adhesive for our Commander Core, and we are going to stick it into place. Let me go ahead and stop you real quick and tell you that it's probably going to be an easier idea to go ahead and plug in the LCD cord from the AIO pump into the Commander Core. I had a little bit of trouble trying to get that connected in after I stuck the Commander Core on the backside of the PC, so go ahead and make sure to do that first. Don't do what I did and try to plug in the LCD cord after you've mounted the Commander Core. Spacing can get a little bit tight here.
Probably should have connected this first.
If you're a goof like me, then don't worry about it. Just make sure to be patient, give it plenty of force, and we should get it connected on in there. Here is our USB splitter as well as our USB connectors for our Commander Core and our AIO pump. We're going to connect both of these up, and it's going to daisy chain into one USB connector, allowing for both the AIO and the Commander Core to draw power from the same USB splitter. Once we've got our USB splitter connected up, let's go ahead and route it underneath the motherboard and prepare to plug it into the USB 2.0 header on the bottom of our motherboard. Just make sure to refer to your motherboard's manual to see where your USB 2.0 headers are located. Make sure to line up the pins with your USB cord and go ahead and give it a little bit of force. We also have a temperature sensor which will be used to read the thermals of our internal components. It has a 2-pin header which will be fairly easy to connect in if you have one. There we go. We'll just route it down to the backside here, and then we will take care of it when it is time to cable manage. Well done so far, guys. We have completed the preliminary round of the plugins section, but now it is time to move on to the real challenge, and that is the RM850X. This is a fully modular power supply, which means all of our cords come detached from the PSU itself. Thus, will give us the freedom to be able to choose which cords are necessary to power our internal components. For this build, we'll be using Sata PCIe, CPU, and motherboard from our power supply. This is our 24-pin connector that will plug directly into the motherboard, and this side we will plug in to the power supply. It is marked on the side, so you will be able to tell which cords are which. The PSU cords and the plug-in sockets have exclusive orientation symbols, so there's no way to incorrectly plug these in. Just make sure to apply a firm force to ensure that the plugs are fully inserted. Our motherboard cords here are to ensure that our motherboard is receiving power from the power supply. Motherboard good to go. Next up, we have our CPU cords. Our CPU cords are to ensure that our central processing unit will receive power from our power supply. My particular motherboard has 2 CPU connectors. There's a possibility that your motherboard might only have one, which is okay. If you only have one cord for your CPU, then you will only need one, but I have 2 for my motherboard, so I'm gonna go ahead and use both cords to ensure that the CPU is receiving the full amount of power. Next up, we have our PCIe cords. These cords are going to be responsible for powering our graphics card, or better known as our GPU. This side right here is what we're going to be plugging in to the PSU. If you do have a graphics card that you will be installing into your build, just be aware of how many PCIe ports that it has, because you may need more than one PCIe cord to fulfill the full power of your graphics card. And lastly, for now, we have our SATA cord. Our SATA cord is going to help supply power to our commander core, our RGB case lighting, as well as our fans that we'll be plugging into our commander core. SATA is also responsible for helping supply power to hard disk drives, HDD storage drives, or 2.5 SSD drives. If you have installed all of your necessary cords that you will be needing for your power supply, let's go ahead and move on to installing the power supply inside of the PC case. Let us loosen our 2 thumb screws here that are holding in our backplate, and we shall remove the backplate, allowing us access to insert the PSU into the PC case. With our backplate removed, let's prepare the PSU for installation. Now I want you to take that monster grip that you have and handle that power supply like a beast. Let's take all of our cords in one hand and begin to route them in through the back. We'll route them in through the back, bring them out the side here, and slowly bring the PSU along with it. With our power supply now fully in place, let's go ahead and take the back plate and thumb screws and secure it back down. To complete the installation process, we have 4 remaining screws to secure our PSU fully into place. Your PC case should come with these additional accessories that are needed. The manufacturers know that we're bound to strip a screw or lose one, so it's really nice that they include additional screws just in case we have a faulty moment. Our power supply is locked down. Excellent work, everybody. Next, we have our USB 3.0 cord. This is going to allow us to have power to our 2 available USB ports located at the top of our PC case. It was a little tough to route this one in. You might have to scoot a few other cables or AIO tubing aside to make clearance for your 3.0 cable. This USB cable has only one way that it may be inserted, so there's no need to worry about incorrectly plugging it in. Once you have a clear path to insert the cable, go ahead and take your opposite hand and place it behind the PC case so you can give this plenty of force to make sure it's fully plugged in. Make sure to refer to your motherboard manual to see where your USB headers on your motherboard are located. If your PC case has USB Type-C Gen 2, then this is the plugin for you. When you've established where your Gen 2 header is located, let's go ahead and line it all up and plug it on in. There's no wrong way to plug this one in. It actually does plug in both ways. The HD audio cable is next, and this will allow us to hook up speakers to our PC. Located on the bottom left side of our motherboard here, let's go ahead and take our connector and line it up with the pins and make sure to fully insert the cable. Here we have our power switch cable, which indeed is used to power on our PC. This 2-pin header along with your reset switch header are likely located at the bottom right of the motherboard. Refer to your motherboard's manual to see where your appropriate system panel headers are located. Once you find the correct headers, go ahead and take your connector, align it with the pins, and gently insert it all the way in. Well done. Your PC will soon be ready for power mode on. Our motherboard's 24-pin connector is located right above our USB 3.1 port. This is a very thick cord to manage. We'll need to use the hands of life to handle this one. But in all seriousness, let's go ahead and take both hands to bend this cord into place. There's only one way to insert this cable, so once you have this cable lined up with the power connector on your motherboard, go ahead and press it in firmly to ensure that it's fully inserted into the motherboard. Good work on getting our motherboard's power connected. Let's move on to the CPU. Our twin CPU connectors are located at the top of our motherboard and slightly to the left side here. If your motherboard has only one CPU connector, then you will only need one cord for this installation. The CPU connectors also have an exclusive symbol orientation to them, so there's no way to incorrectly plug these in. Just make sure to align the CPU cord up with the notch on the connector and give it a firm push to make sure that it's fully inserted. These cords are definitely a pain in the butt, but as long as you're patient, use plenty of force, and persevere, you will eventually get them connected in. It may not seem like it, but once the CPU cord is connected in, it does give you a little bit of slack to be able to move the cord around. In this case, we're going to have to move it slightly to the left side, so we'll be able to insert our next CPU cord. The second cord did give me a tiny bit of trouble, so we're gonna just speed up the process here. But don't worry, we'll eventually get it inserted on in. Great job tackling the CPU cord installation, guys. Let's start plugging in our PC case fans. At the tip of the fan connectors, we have an insert lane as well as our channel headers on our motherboard that have a guide. This will allow us to line up our connector and be able to insert it into the header itself. Be careful with this process as we do not want to damage the pins on our fan channel headers. Make sure to refer to your motherboard's manual to see where your additional fan headers are located. Here we have our commander core connector, which will be given power by our Sata cord. If you notice the shape of a 1 on both plugins, That is our indication of how to align the two up to connect them together. This cannot be done incorrectly. Once you got them aligned up, just give a firm push with both hands to ensure that the two are fully inserted. If you have no commander core and you have additional fans that need to be hooked in, go ahead and use the remaining channel headers on your motherboard to finish the plug-in process. Our commander core has 6 available spots on the left side for our case fans, while the right side has 6 available spots for the RGB lighting. The RGB and PC fan cords are individually marked, so we should not have a problem mixing these two up. We're going to start with our first RGB cord. Just like our fan headers, our commander core ports also have guides within them. Just align the notch of the connector up with the guide and you'll be able to plug the RGB cord in. Some of these can be a little tricky to plug in, so just be easy with your hands and as precise as you can. Let's get our next case fan installed, and as you may have guessed, the same rules apply here. Just make sure to line up the notch with the guide inside the port and slide the connector on in. If you're having a little bit of trouble just like me, don't sweat it. The connector will eventually find its home inside the commander core. Alrighty, that's 2 down and 10 to go. Let's take this extra time to get the rest of them plugged in. While we're getting the rest of our fans plugged in, let me just take this short opportunity to congratulate you guys on a job well done so far. The challenge has been high, the cost has been high, but we're persevering and making it through. Let's band together and finish strong. Our fans are all connected. Well done, guys. Let's top it off with connecting up our RGB case lighting to our Sata power cord here. And now we shall be moving on to the big one, the RTX 3080 Ti. The duty of a graphics card comes right down to providing an image for your monitor. Graphics cards are essentially important when it comes to video editors, audio editors, Photoshop, Blender, and you guessed it, gaming, my friends. Oh yeah, mining cryptocurrency too, we almost forgot about that one. GPUs come in at the budget tier, mid-tier, and high-tier levels. The higher tier your graphics card, the better graphical performance, higher frames, faster video editing, etc. It all depends on what type of experience and performance you are looking for. Our GPU is going to be occupying our top PCIe slot, so make sure to remove a few of the brackets on the left side here to make room for the GPU's backplate. We'll also want to make sure that we release the latch that will give us access to the PCIe lane, thus allowing us to insert the graphics card. With our brackets removed and our latch open, let's go ahead and install the GPU. This is a very delicate process, so please be patient and take it slow. You spent a lot of money for this GPU, and we don't want anything terrible to happen to it. Align the GPU's insert chip with the PCIe slot and give it some good force. If you need to use your other hand behind the PC to establish that force, go ahead and do so. If you're confident that your GPU is fully inserted, then go ahead and give yourselves a mighty thumbs up. We'll have to screw the GPU down, so go ahead and take one of the screws that you've removed with your bracket and apply it to the screw hole on your GPU. To ensure that our GPU is receiving power, we must plug in the PCIe cords to the PCIe ports on the graphics card. Our graphics card and our PCIe cables also have symbol-oriented shapes, which means there's only one way to plug these cords in. Just make sure to align the shapes up and give them a good firm plug into the GPU. You'll notice your included PCIe cable comes with what appears to be a 6-pin connector with 2 dangling off to the side. This is simply known as a 6+2 connector. There are some GPUs out there that only have 6-pin ports on the graphics card. As you can see, this graphics card has 3 8-pin ports, which means I'm going to have to utilize all 8 pins for this connector. As you can see here, we need to take our 2 additional pins that are hanging off to the side and join them up with our 6, which will give us our 8. This can be a little bit of a painful process because it needs to be very precise. We could have VGA connection issues if we do not plug these connectors fully into the graphics card. Something else I want to mention to you guys that I think is important, it is also not recommended to daisy chain your PCIe cables into your GPU. There are other forms such as fans that we can daisy chain into, but your GPU, depending on how many ports it has, needs to draw an even amount of power from the PSU, and when you use daisy chaining, it will split that power up. So it will be essential to go ahead and use 3 separate PCIe cables to ensure your GPU is going to receive the full amount of power.
Ladies and gentlemen, the EVGA GeForce RTX 3080 Ti. Whoa. FTW3.
Congratulations on getting everything connected up so far. If you've done it by yourself, give yourself a high five. If you've done it with a pal, make sure to give them a massive chest bump. Just a couple things remain, including getting your monitor ready and the optional installation of a capture card. The capture card is going to occupy our bottom PCIe slot, so let's remove our bottom bracket. We are using the bottom PCIe slot here because we want to ensure that our capture card has plenty of clearance for installation. Align the card's chip with the PCIe slot and give it a good push to make sure that it's firmly installed. We'll also want to confirm that the capture card's backplate is firmly seated where we removed the bracket. Capture cards are a necessity if you wish to capture or record gameplay from a dedicated console such as an Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo console. If you are capturing through your PC, then your dedicated graphics card will be your main source of capturing gameplay. We'll also need to screw down the capture card, so make sure to grab the screw that you removed from the original backplate and apply it to the capture card to fully secure it into place. Well done, guys. The capture card is looking bold and ready. Go ahead and grab your cord for the power supply, and we're going to insert it into the PSU. This will ensure that we will bring power to everything inside the PC, and I mean everything. It will also be safe to make sure that your PSU is switched to off mode before we actually plug it into a power source. Here we have our cords for our peripherals such as our monitor, mouse, and keyboard. I originally plugged my monitor in up here on the motherboard, but it's probably going to be a lot more essential that you use the graphics card for your monitor just for our initial startup. For the peripherals such as mouse and keyboard, we can use any of our additional USB 2.0 ports on the back or 3.2. If you also have speakers that you'll be hooking up, you'll want to plug those into the line out port. If you have an Ethernet cord or a Wi-Fi adapter, you can choose to plug them in now, although they are not necessary just yet. We'll go ahead and start with our monitor, followed by our mouse and keyboard. Our essential peripherals are plugged in for now. Let's move on to the power cord. To be safe, make sure your power strip is turned off before we plug our power cord in.
Alright guys, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the surge protector here. Right now our PC is still in off mode, so I'm going to get the monitor turned on first. So this is definitely a big moment. I feel I am really excited about how this is going to turn out. So I think what I need to do now is I need to actually physically turn the monitor on. Button right here. So the monitor's on right now, and I think it might just go like into sleep mode because it's not getting any signal to anything. So this is the big deal here. We're gonna flip the power switch, see what happens. I'm already anticipating things that may happen. It's definitely always a possibility, but here we go. Yeah, I'm getting a caution light from the cooler. I'm not 100% sure what that really means. I can tell that the motherboard is connected, and I knew that it was on sideways. They have said that it doesn't really matter what side it's mounted on, but since this is an LCD screen, in this case I can see that it does matter. I am gonna go ahead and hit the power button. We're just gonna see what happens now. Oh wow, the screen actually came on. Well, the LCD screen came on. It doesn't actually look like I'm getting any power from my keyboard or the monitor yet. Let me see something here. The monitor should be on. Oh wow, okay, there it is. Let's just wait for a little bit. It is detecting both the M.2s, detecting the keyboard and the mouse, 4 hubs, I think maybe for RPG. Let's see. Let's see here. Okay, plus let me take a look one more time on the inside. It kind of looks like our 140 millimeters running a little slow right now. And like the RBG on the sides, all three fans are good. We're not really getting so much for our coolers up top, but I think actually that's because we have to download that software. Graphics card is looking solid. All right, we're gonna press F1 here. And I will be completely honest, guys. It's definitely been a while since I've done a fresh reboot on this system. So I am probably going to have to definitely do a little more research on this one. And I will get back to you guys. Well, guys, I will admit, this was definitely a very fun, exhilarating experience. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I wasn't even expecting myself to be as informative as I was. I was expecting to, you know, throw in a few flashy shots with some relaxing music in the background, some inspirational music in the background, but I'm glad I decided to be a little more up close with the connectors, you know, where everything plugs in. Of course, don't do what I did with the AIO because the LCD screen is sideways. At least it's on. At least it's on. I was kind of scratching my head there for a minute. Any time, obviously, that I did have like a hiccup or I wasn't sure what I was doing, you know, I did resort to my manuals that came with my products. I did resort to the internet and also to YouTube because, you know, these guys, they know what they're doing out there, so you know I'm going to listen to them. But the fun thing about a PC build is that it's different for everybody. It is such a singular experience because your parts aren't going to be the same as their parts. Your form factors can be from large, medium, small. The different kinds of components that you can use inside your PC to just make everything work, make everything flow. You can make it high powered, you can make it mid power, low power, you can make it functional, or you can make it flashy. And I like the aesthetics when you are given the option to be able to customize it how you want. And I think that that is the really cool experience that only you can have, because you're not going to have the same experience that everyone else has. And that's why I really enjoyed building this one and actually being able to really be in depth about the different functions and, you know, when it comes to plugging everything in and getting everything working. I know that I still have some things to work out. I got to get Windows installed. We got to get these cables managed. And I believe that there is a code that I'm seeing on my motherboard, and I'm going to have to tweak that stuff as well. The build is complete. We have the technical things now to worry about. We may have to, you know, do some unplugging, re-plugging, uninstalling, reinstalling, you know, to get everything the way that I want it. But at the end of the day, guys, I really enjoyed making this content for you. And if you enjoyed the video and you found it informative as well, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you would like to see more entertaining content in the future, and comment and let me know if you have done your first PC build, and or if you are a veteran in the PC building community. Let me know what your best
worst experiences have been when it comes to the BC. When it comes to the PC building side of things. So guys, thank you for joining me on this one. I hope that you have a good one out there. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. I will see you in the next video. Alright, let's install Windows.
Ah! One issue I was experiencing with the Windows install was internet. I did try my Ethernet cord and Wi-Fi and neither worked. I could not get past the internet section of Windows install. So just to let you guys know, you do not need to connect to the internet until after you've reached the home screen and finished the preliminary Windows install. I finally found the courage to remove my Coldplate and flip my LCD screen right side up. So now we are looking extra solid. I also decided to go with custom cables, which is why I did not cable manage after our initial setup. I would definitely go this direction, guys, because it is a lot easier to manage these rather than the factory cables, and you can add an aesthetic flair to your PC setup.
Alright, I did some cable management in the back, finally got the side panel put on, and I plugged in the monitor to the graphics card first, wasn't getting any display, then I plugged it into the motherboard, wasn't getting any display, so it was freaking me out. Then I plugged it back into the graphics card, unplugged it from the monitor, and it seemed to come on.
I know this video was supposed to end about 5 minutes ago, but if you guys have stuck with me all the way to the end, you don't know how much I appreciate it. I really did learn a lot with this being only my second build, and I'm definitely glad to feel like I can give back some information and some insight as to what I learned to you guys. So thank you very much, and I will catch you guys in the next one.
But we got one last thing to do. The plastic has finally been removed.
Alrighty, this is new gen PC build, take number 72. Roll it. Speed and action. Alright. How'd you fall down anyway? Welcome, friends, family, and those who may be interested in what this video is about. How do we even start this stuff?